Hello, Embird users. This is Lisa WeQuilt with WeQuilt Studio, and this lesson is going to be about the Embird alphabets and how we make an outline around an Embird alphabet. Now, this is in Studio Regular, but you can also do this in Studio Next, and in Studio Next, there might even be easier ways to do it. Maybe not easier, but different. But so for right now, since most people are familiar with Studio Regular, we'll just do this one in Studio Regular. And so I typed in the word love, and I'll just go ahead and do it again just so you can see how I got this. So I'll just go to text and then text again. That means an Embird alphabet. I'll click and I'll just type in the same word, love. And I'm going to come over here, and I made the height 20 mils. It's about 3/4 of an inch. So I just clicked on the arrow, I put in a 20, or I hit this. So many ways, or you could, you know, do it that way by holding your left mouse or right mouse to reduce it. And I also clicked on the A again and came down to the bottom. The character spacing here was 0. That's the default, and it was far apart. So I went ahead and put my right mouse button on the 0 and just held it down. And you can see that these two letters are getting closer, but these are not as close as the V and the E. And obviously it's going to connect up here because Embird always connects to the nearest join. So I'm going to go ahead and make that just a little bit bigger, because sometimes I like to land a stitch point in between the two rather than having one stitch going over. And if I hold the plus sign, usually I like that to be about 1 mil. That's about 1 mil. But that means that your stitch points are going to be, really, really small. So let me hold my minus, click my minus and zoom out. Maybe I'll just hold my left mouse and make it slightly bigger right there. That's about good. And then these two, I'll just hit, instead of baseline, I'll hit characters. So now I have these little dots. I'll click on the V and it'll move the V and the E. And then I'll click the O and it'll move all 3 of those letters. I'm looking down here. So that looks about good. So I'll hit the check mark. So what you see though is you see these are columns, meaning, this is going to stitch out really, really well. Go ahead and I'll just delete the orange one since they're the same. So when I just, without even going into params and just hit generate stitches, you can see, take the E for instance, go into 3D, this is tucked in underneath here and so on. And if you look at the E, you'll see that that object stitches first if I click down in the parts window and drag this up. So, that's the beauty of the Embird alphabets, is that they come in little parts. And even though when I was creating it, there's one thing I wanted to show you. I'm going to select them all, hit Control A or select them, and go into text. I'll just click Edit Text. And I'm going to go back to baseline. I'm going to drag it up so I can see it. When you look up here, usually when you do font engine text or Embird alphabet text, you see these are your choices, but just know that when you're doing an Embird alphabet, even though this, if I hover over it, it says auto column, it really isn't an auto column. It's a regular column. So one thing I wanted you to be aware of, because that could be confusing. They just kept the same icons here for both Embird alphabet and Font Engine. So in Font Engine, you can only make either auto column or fill or center line. I don't use center line. I use it after the fact for various reasons, but that's another video. But at any rate, if we want to put an outline around an Embird alphabet, we want to choose this second choice. It's going to create your outline as a branched outline, meaning there's going to be two layers, so you're going to have travel stitches and whatnot. It's not going to be just a single layer outline. So then it's really hard to edit if you did need to edit it. And just looking at this, I know it's going to have a mistake because of the O. The O has a hole in it, so it's going to stitch the inner outline and it's going to connect with a travel stitch right through your fill. I'll show you what I mean if I selected this column with outline. I'll show you what happens. So I'll just have it selected and I'll hit the check mark. And here's the outline in pink, and you can see already that it created that travel stitch. These did well, even though they're double stitches. If I click on this, you could see this is like as if we were to hit the branching icon. It branched everything so that they're connected, but they're double layered. If I hit generate stitches, so that's what you get, and it looks great. Except for this. And like I said, yes, you could go in and find that it looks like it's two layers, so you have to edit both of these little objects here in the parts window. If I wanted to get rid of these and just make that a satin so that it goes along with the satin here, you know, if you want it to just look like the satin, granted this will be the same color in this case. If this outline were a different color like it is now, then we wouldn't even want to convert it into a satin. We would want to get rid of it altogether. So there's so many ways I can branch off on this scenario. So we'll just go with this scenario that we have up here, and I'll show you how this becomes a satin, and then, you know, we'll make them all the same color. So one thing we do want to remember is we chose that second choice, which was auto column with outline, and so we have auto columns here. And yes, they still generated nicely, but you'll notice that the V is slightly different than it would have been if these were regular columns. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just right click and it says ungroup 1 is taken, so I'll group 2, but I'll control C, control V. I'll slide this up to the top. I'll turn it a different color for now, and I'll make this one the regular column. So I'll go up here to text, edit text, and instead of auto column with outline, we're going to choose this one that says auto column. But remember, since it's an Embird alphabet, it's going to be a regular column. So I'll choose that, and I'll just, everything else stayed the same. So we'll hit the check. And I'll go ahead while it's selected. You could see their columns, even the grouped ones you can see down in the parts window, their columns. But you could see how the V is created. Let me group 2. And I'm just going to move these up so we could compare them. And I'll generate them and these. So you may or may not like this, you know, the way this is generated. The E's look the same, the L looks the same. You may like this down here, but remember, if your lettering is really big, this might be too long of a satin. Let's see how long it is. Got the measurer. That's 5.5 mils. If this lettering were bigger, then that would probably be too big, so you would want to go with the auto column version. So let's go ahead with this outline then and try to edit it. Now I can group these. It might make it easier to see them. So I'll right click ungroup 2. And I'll just use my plus sign to zoom in. You could see there's a stitch point there. So we have to find that one. Now remember, it's 2 layers. Here it is here, and here's the other one, the double layer. This notch is what we're looking for right there and there, this notch. So we'll just take the first one, and you could see it's got a long, you know, travel stitch or what have you coming off of it, because these are the travel stitches, these are the backward paths, meaning the decorative stitch, the final stitch. So, well, in this case, they're both the same, the decorative stitch, because they're just single stitches. But just so you know, backward path is the final stitch whenever you branch. So, and when I say branch, I mean arrange outline parts. That's what Embird calls it. Probably because there's a copyright on the word branching, but it's arrange outline parts. So anyway, so I'll click on the first one and I'll just hit edit, and I can see, you know, it's here and then it's down here. So I could go into normal or vector view to see things better. I could have erased all of my stitches to see things better. And let me X out and do that. I'll go on the satin here, and I'll just do it on all of them. I'll select them all. Objects, erase stitches, just so I could see better. So I'll click on this again, and you know, you could see it's pretty big, and I'll just hit edit. And this is what I want to separate from the rest of them, because I have to make that a satin stitch with just one stitch, one long stitch with a stitch penetration here and here. So the best way to do that is to separate it and then make it into an outline, and then make that outline stitch really long. That's the easiest way. You could then go one more step to make it manual, but usually you can achieve this by just going the first step by making it an outline. So whenever you edit, it always lands on the last node of the object, so it's landing here. And if I hit my end key, I'm hitting it, that's where it's landing. And if I want to go to the stitch previous to that, I would hold Control and hit home, because the home key, if I hit home by itself, it goes to the first stitch. But if I hit the N key again, if I hit Control and Home, it goes backwards only one stitch. So I'll hold Control and hit Home. Okay, so it stayed right there. So that tells me it's not going up here anytime soon. So I could hold Control and hit the Home key again, and now it's still there. So something's going on there. Let me zoom in with my plus sign. Okay, you've got stitches really close together. That's what's going on there. So if I hold Control and hit Home again, now I'm over here. So this one isn't even part of the scenario for a long time. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this and separate there and see what I get. So I'll right click, split object, and I'll look over here and see what I have. And so I have this object, and then I have this one below it. So this one below it still has the notch. I can see it there. So let me hit edit. So now this is the first node, and this, I'm sorry, this is the first node, and this is the last node. So that's still kind of interesting, because let's zoom in again. So we still got those two nodes going on. So to make things easier, I know this is the one I want to separate. I'm just going to click on this, and I'm going to hit Control End, which will take me to the next node. And it takes me to that node, of course. And so I'll zoom in real close because I want to split it right here, and I don't want it jumping to this node. So that's why I zoomed in, because, you know, these are so close to each other, you might end up having it jump, and when you're right clicking, that happens to me a lot. So I zoom in, right click. It's not letting me split it. I'm going to just move that. Okay, I forgot to tell you something. So this is the end node, and when I was up here and I hit Control N to get to the next node, it did go to the next node, you can see, but since this ending node was on top of it, this node here was on top of this second node, so when I went to right click down here to split it, it right clicked on the end node because the end node is on top. So that's always a pain. So anyway, so you'd move that end point out of the way, and you know, split it, right click, split, but then you'd come back to this object that's after it and just snap it back on where it goes, because I have snap to node on. So let's go back to this one. I'm going to hit Control 1 to zoom in, because remember, if I hit generate stitches and hit 3D, it still has that stitch point that we want to get rid of. So it's just an outline all by itself, and we'll go into params, and we're just going to make the min and max length really long. So you figure this is about, where's it going? We can't get to the tape measure while this is open. I should have measured it, but it's from 475 to say 478, so it's about 3 mils. So make it at least 3.5 mils min and max. 3.5, apply, and it went away. So that one's done. So I'm just going to hide it and find the other one. The other one is right here. So with it selected, I'll just hit edit, and let me just zoom out so you can see. So this is the end point, and then down here is where we have to split it, but you could see that's showing that that's the beginning node. So we're okay with this one because the beginning node is underneath this second last node here. So I'm on the N node, I'll hit the N key, and then I'll hit Control Home, and then I'll right click, split object, and there's the circle, and then here's the line, and we'll go into params, min 3.5, and max 3.5, apply, and that one is also satin. So I'll bring the other one back. So they're both satins. It's a double layer, and there's no jumps. It's all going to stitch seamlessly. Group 1. But since, you know, we decided we're going to make it all the same color, so we'll make this one green. Either drag it down or hold your right mouse, drag, let go, set identical color, and then generate that, and there you go. You could say, yeah, but I kind of wanted to use this version with the regular columns. Well, that's fine. One way to do it, if you don't want to just move these on top of each other, because you may think, oh, they might not go exactly on top of each other. So what you could do is just select the auto column one and copy and paste it. Control C, Control V. This is the one that we'll say I'm going to get rid of. So I'm going to make it yellow. I always make the ones I'm going to get rid of yellow. But at any rate, this is the one we copied and pasted off of this yellow one. And then we'll just go text, edit text, and then choose the first choice, which is regular column. And then, of course, it's yellow. We'll move it up, insert before, and group. I'll just drag this green because I know it's the same color. And then I would get rid of this one or just hide it for now. Now, you may wonder, why didn't I just do an edit text on just this green one? Why did I copy and paste and do the edit text on either the pasted one or the original? Well, the reason why I do that sometimes is because when you do an edit text on an Embird alphabet or any alphabet, even if it's a true type font, if you've moved that text since you've actually created it, then when you go to edit text, it actually puts the text back to the original position from when you created it. And so you'll lose your positioning. So that's why I make a copy, just to make sure I don't lose my positioning. And then I just use the transformation tool to align my new text or what have you. And I'll show you what I mean. So if I wrote something, we'll just do text, and I'll just write happy. Okay, so originally the position is right here, and I'll hit the check mark, and it just so happened I had an outline on it. That doesn't matter. I'll just delete it. This position is down here, and I'll go ahead and group this, and I'll just make it purple. So if I'm going along and editing and and stuff. And maybe I wanted this to be up here somewhere instead of down here where I created it. Well, if later on I go and decide I want to edit this and click text, edit text, it moves down here. You know, say I wanted to move the characters more. Say I wanted this to be moved a little and this to be moved a little. And then I hit the check mark. Okay, so here it is back down here. So I've totally lost my place up here. But if I would have, I'm just going to group the whole thing on group 2, group 3. If I would have, say, moved it up here and then say, oh, I need to edit that again. If I copied and pasted it and made, you know, one of them yellow, and then I'll go back to the one that I'm going to edit. Well, when I edit it, text, edit text, and it does come down here and say, again, it's still on characters, say I wanted to move this one or what have you. Okay. Oops. And then I'll hit the check mark and, you know, it stays there. Now it's changed it to yellow because that's my color that's selected up here. So let me change it back to purple. And here's the outline down here, but that's okay. So I'll just group this. On group 2 is taken, so group 3. And then I want the purple one to move back up into position. So I'll click the yellow one first, hold control, and then click the purple. The last one you select is the one that will move. And then go into the transformation tool right here, alignment. And this one is checked first by default, the horizontal. Click apply. And then click this one, the vertical, and apply. And now it's in the right position. So normally that's why I kind of do the copy paste instead of just editing the font or the, you know, the text in order to get a different parameter, meaning in order to get either the regular or the auto column with outline or the fill or whatever, I always do the copy paste. So I know that's a long explanation, but if you know you haven't moved it, then fine, you don't have to do copy paste. So in other words, if I created a text and I know exactly where I want it to be, and let me just take off the outline, and I know exactly where I want it to be, then I'll click the check mark and I'll just group this and generate. And I don't move it or anything. And I say to myself, I would, instead of the regular columns, I liked the auto column. And I haven't moved this, so I'm just going to go into text, edit text. And I like the auto column. So even though this generates an outline, I could delete the outline, you know. And then I'll just click that and hit the check mark and generate stitches. And in this case, let me go ahead and delete the outline. In this case, it doesn't look like anything changed on this lettering. I thought maybe the Y might change, but it didn't because it's not like the V. you know, it's just a little bit different. So in this case, it didn't change, but sometimes, to be honest, oh, the A might have changed. The A up here is like the V, so I I'm pretty sure that with the column, the A would have been like how the V was with the column where this was overlapping. So at any rate, to be honest, auto columns sometimes are easier to edit. You know, you could change your start and end points and so on, but you don't have as much control as you do with a column, a regular column, but you can break apart a lettering and make it behave like an auto column. Like I could break these two apart. I could break this apart and this apart if I wanted to change how the Y went, even when it's a regular, even when it's an auto column. So just so you know, and that's again another lesson. There's so much you can do with text, any text, font engine, auto column, you know, regular column, and so on. This is just touching the surface, to be honest. So that's just a summary of why I do the copy and paste. So back to the video. And then we would have the auto column. And, you know, to me, the regular column does look better when it's this size. Granted, that 5 mils is getting a little long. You know, it might be okay on a shirt, but that you kind of don't want to go over like, you know, 3.5 mils for your satin, maybe 4. You know, we use 4 mils for applique. So that one, this one here being you know, being the 5.5 or whatever it was, it is kind of pushing it. So that's kind of up to you. Sometimes you don't even want the satin. You just want an outline. So of course you wouldn't want this here in that case. So then let's say you did just want this outline by itself. Well, since this is branched, let me ungroup it. This outline is branched. If I just went and deleted these objects, so here it is over here, and I hit delete, and then I found the other one down here and hit delete, I don't have a seamless stitch out. I have a jump here and a jump here, and you could say to yourself, well, I could put this small O, hold my right mouse, move it down, insert after, put it down there because, you know, it's going to stitch last anyways. And then, yes, that would work. So you'd have, you know, all of these, the L, the outer part of the O, the V, the E would stitch seamlessly. Then you'd have a tie off and then a tie on to this one and it'll stitch last. So yes, you could do it that way. Sometimes your word isn't this easy though. Sometimes it introduces a lot of moving around. You know, you'll have a lot of letters like this that have an inside hole, what have you. So it might just be a little more confusing. So another way to do it would be, let me just Control Z to bring everything back to how it was. Okay, I'm just going to select these and group them again. Hit Control S. Another way to do it would be to take your lettering, your original, and I'm going to just start a new project on it. But if I just copy and paste it, Control C, Control V, turn that purple and drag it over, well, I'm going to go into text, edit text. It's just going to come right back over here again. So just know that that's going to happen. But I just don't want to confuse you when you see me editing this. So anyway, I copied and pasted it. I moved it over, and I'm going to go into text, edit text. And you can see it's like it's over here now because that's where we originally had it. I'll just move it over. So right now it's the regular column, which is the first choice, even though it says auto column. And I'm just going to go ahead and choose the fill. Now I'm not going to choose the fill with the outline because that outline is just going to be branched like these other outlines were, like this one up here was. So I'm going to choose the fill because I want to create my outline after the fact so that I have more control over it, so it's not branched and so on. And also when I create it as a fill, I have this nearest points still selected over here. So this fill object, it's going to connect nearest points. So it's going to connect here, it's going to connect here and here, just like it has been. So I copied and pasted this green. I brought it over to here. I hit text, edit text. And of course it jumped over to here, and then I dragged it down here. And then I chose just a fill. And this nearest points connections is selected. So I'll hit the check mark. And so now you're probably saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, why didn't it jump back over to the green? Well, that's because when we were editing the text, we took that little red square that was right here and we dragged it over and we edited it over here so that when we hit enter, this became our new position. So it is very confusing, I know. And you may get used to it or you may always forget. I always forget because I do things differently so often and things come up and you want to edit one thing or another. So you will forget. So just bear with it. So anyways, so now we have this new position, but you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, I lost the regular column that I had over here. Well, that's okay because now that this is our new position, you could take this fill object and I'll just group it and Control C, Control V and make one of those. We'll just select the first one. And I believe we made our fill pink. And we'll just go and edit that and turn it back into the regular column. So text, edit text. Instead of the fill, we'll use the regular column, first one, even though it says auto column. Hit the check and generate. We'll group it on group 2. On group 1 is taken, so we'll group 2. And we still have our fill down here. Now from this fill, since it's very simple, let's go ahead and hide this regular column. So since our fill is just very simple, and you can see that it already has, let me ungroup it. It has the connections in, and you can see the connections are all in the right spots for us. So that's the beauty of just making a fill first, and now I'll make an outline from this fill. So I'll select them all. It doesn't matter if you're selecting the connections. And we'll go to convert, create outline from fill, and there's our outline. They don't have connections, but if I click on, say, the L, I'll just zoom in and hit edit, let's go ahead and make our start point down here. So let's right click, place start point down here. And then the O, let's hit edit. Okay, it's starting here. Let's place our start point here. And then the V, edit. And let's go ahead and place the start point here. And what's nice about this is that we know exactly where to place our start points. You notice that I'm placing my start point of my outline exactly where the next object begins. So the next object E is beginning here, and so I'm going to place my start point here. So it is still a little bit of work, but at least it does the work for you so that you don't have to guess where to put everything. So we'll right click, place start point here. So let me select them all, and I'm going to turn them red. Now we'll want the little part of the O to stitch last. So we'll just take it and right click, hold, let go, insert after. And then these, the LOVE, the outside of the O, we'll go ahead and we'll branch. So I'll hit branch. Okay. And if you look down here in the parts window, down here, you could see this LO is stitching last, but you can see up here, if I click on this one, these are travel stitches. Remember, these are the final stitches. But if I click on there and hit edit, you'll see that it's ending here and it's starting here. So, you know, Embird made its own way of branching those. So when I branched it, everything came down to the bottom of the list, you know, after I branched it. So the O is not even at the end anymore, it's at the beginning. And that's fine. We could stitch this O first or last. It doesn't matter. Sometimes you may want to stitch it first anyways, because then maybe you won't have as much movement when you do end up stitching it, you know, once everything else stitches. So we can leave it first, but then here's the rest of the lettering, and we'll generate, and there it is. It's a double stitching. Now with the little O, since it's still single, we want to just give it a backward path. So we'll go to transform, create backward path. Of course, that one goes to the bottom. We'll just right click and drag it up, insert after. So now this will stitch with a double row of stitching, just like the branched ones. So then there's your lettering for if you just want it by itself. And a third scenario would be, I don't even know if this is the third or fourth or what. There's so many scenarios. But another scenario would be, and let me just scroll over this and group it, would be to, and here's the fill, okay, and that fill was just used to, you know, to help me get the outline. I'm just going to group it. So now the last technique will be if we want an outline to stitch right after each letter. So I'm just going to take this original green over here, and start a new project. So I'll do Control C, Control V, and I'll bring that, I'll just bring it kind of in the center, and I'll turn it gray. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the, making a fill and then making an outline from that fill. So just so you know, you can just take this column or any fill that might have a lot of parts to it. You can do transform, shaping, union, but you don't get the connection stitches that help you through creating your outline. I'll show you what I mean. So if I did union, yes, I get a fill. Let's just turn this different green. Okay. I get just a regular fill, but there's no connection stitches that help me. Like if I were to take, let's just object, erase stitches. If I were to go to this L, yeah, we know we would make them down here. So that one's easy, but let's look at the O. With the O, if I hit edit, we don't know where to make that starting O for an outline. We know it's somewhere around here, but the V's not even starting. Look at, here's the red dot for the V. It's starting way over here, where it should start right here. So if I were to make an outline off of this, it'd be the same scenario. Whoops. If I selected this and did convert, create outline from fill, if we took, say, the outer O and did edit, we don't see any connections here. If we made it here, then yeah, we could place start point here, but then when we get to the V, we'd have to tell the V to start over here, right across from this, and look, there's not even a node there. So, you'd have to insert, and then, you may have to move it, and so you have to make sure you're snapping to edges, and then you have something to snap to make sure there's something underneath it. So it's not as quick, but just know that that is another option. So let's get rid of that. Let's just Control Z back out. So anyways, all I did was I copied and pasted my original green up here, the regular column. I brought it down here and turned it gray. So like I said, we're going to make the outline the same way we made this previous outline. So I'll go to text, edit text. I'll drag this down and I'll select fill, and my connections are still the same. I'll hit the check mark, and there's my new fill. Now, yes, I lost my regular column, but I'm just going to deal with that when I'm done creating my outline. So I'm just going to group this fill. And now I'm going to create an outline from the fill. You can see it has its connections there all ready for us. So I'll go to convert, create outline from fill. I'll make them a different color. Maybe I'll make them a lighter gray. So this time I'm having each outline of each letter stitch after the regular column. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring back that regular column. So I'm just going to click on the green, either here, or I like to always click in the object window. That's the outline. Here's the regular column, and I'm just going to do Control C, Control V. So this is the one that I want to align with this outline before I go any further. So I'm just going to grab the outline, all of it, and right click and group it. And then I'll hold Control and select the regular column, and then I will go up to the transformation window. And remember, the last one I selected was the green, so that's the one that'll move. Doesn't really matter in this case because I don't have it set anywhere, but just so you know, the last one selected is the one that will move. So I'll click the alignment tool, line horizontal, click the vertical, and apply. And click close. And I'm just going to move the satin, hold my right mouse, let go, insert before. So now it's all lined up. Let's go back to our outline and ungroup it. And I actually want to ungroup the satin as well. So I'm just going to slide over both of them and right click and ungroup. I'll just click ungroup 2. Okay. And then, so those are ungrouped, but down here, I just didn't want to mess anything up on group 1. So I did have to do them separately, just to keep these locks on where they need to be on. So at any rate, here I am. Let me just kind of drag that down. So I'm just going to go ahead for right now, and I'm going to put my outlines after the letters. Even though they're a different color, I just like to keep them a different color till I'm ready to make it all one color. So I'll right click on the outline, insert after. These two, I'm just going to take them both, insert after. And this one, insert after. And then this one is already after. So now they're in their proper positions. Let's see, this is the outer and this is the inner. We want the inner to stitch first, the inner outline. So right click, insert before. Okay. So we'll just make them all the same color. Now I'm just going to drag them and drag that color down. So now you see we got all kind of jumps and everything, but that's okay. So we're going to click on this outline and we'll click edit. Let me just click save. I haven't saved in a while. Edit. And it's starting there. We know we want it to start down here and everything's already set. So we'll just click on it and right click, place start point here. So now that outline is fine. We've got a bunch of other things happening, but that's okay. We're just going to go one by one. And so don't worry about the connections because they follow. So this connection here is still good. There's no jumps or anything. It's just after this O stitches, we have a jump here. So before we address this inner O outline, let's make sure that we have this object here hidden, because as you can see, I have another connection showing. This was our fill. You can see it down here that we just used. I'm just going to hide it for now. We can get rid of it later. So I just want to make sure that it doesn't confuse us. So let's go back to the O and the inner outline of the O, and we can see, incidentally, if you want to pan, hold down your right mouse, but don't click on the screen, just kind of move your mouse around and you'll get that hand that you can pan. So anyways, we'll click on the inner O outline and we'll click edit. And let me just go into vector view or normal view. And we can see that our column, okay, is ending somewhere around here. I can see the overlaps, but even if I zoom in, I'm not quite sure. So I'm just going to X out of this. So I'm going to click on the column, and I'm going to look down in the parts window and click on the actual column part and just hit edit for a moment. And I can see that the column is, this is the ending node, but remember on columns, it's actually this one that ends. But still, we're working on the inner outline. So we want our inner outline to start right here where kind of this column ends. I mean, yes, we're going to have to make a connection for the actual ending, where the actual ending of the column is. But for right now, you know, this is our node that's we want our inner outline to be. And it's interesting because when I hit enter and say I click on that inner outline, okay, and hit edit, yes, I can kind of see where I need to snap to, but the red dot is over here. So just so you know, this is the one where we have to actually make a node here, a square node. And this is only happening because it's a letter that has an inner and an outer to it. So those do present more work. So I'm just going to go ahead. You could see that, you know, it's starting way down here. We want it to start right about here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click here. The arrow is pointing to it, and I'll hit insert. And look, there's a round node almost right where we need it. But let's make it square. Click on it, insert. And I'll put snap to node on and see if it will snap to that. And it did. It kind of went in a little, so which kind of made this possibly look a little crooked. So let's go ahead and snap to object edges here. You have to zoom in if you really want to snap. Whoops. Let's zoom out with my minus sign. I'll hold my right mouse and pan. Okay. And I'll just kind of snap there just so it looks smoother. And I'll hold my right mouse and pan down again. Okay. So that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. So now that we have it there, let's click on it and right click, place start point here. Okay. And so now that we have our start point, let's go ahead and right click, create connection. So there's our connection. Now let's go ahead and generate this to make sure that our connection is in the correct angle. So, okay. And then after the satin stitches, we have this connection. That looks good. That looks like a good angle. So, but now if we go into 3D and we generate that connection, of course, it's going to have stitches, stitch penetrations. So let's go to convert connection to outline. It's still selected. And we'll go into params, and I'm just going to make them both like really long, like 4. That'll cover our bases. I'll just click this 4. and hit apply, and there's our satin. So the inner is done. So now for the outer, and we can see that, you know, we're working in the same area as far as where we want the start point to be. So let's just hit edit. And if I zoom out, and I'll just go into vector view again, and you could see it's starting down here, and we want it to be right about here. So we already have a node that's fairly close. I could probably click on this node and just hit insert to make it square, and I have snap to object edges, and you know, it's snapping to the columns object edge. So we'll just put it right there. So that should be good. It should make a nice satin stitch there from where the inner outline ends. So we'll right click and place start point here and hit enter. And now we'll right click on it in the object window, create connection. So there's our connection. And now we'll convert that connection to an outline so that we could make the stitch length longer, because you can see if I go into 3D and generate that, we've got those stitch points again. So we'll just go to convert connection to outline. Now it's an outline, but we still have to give it, you know, if I generate stitches, it still has the stitch points, not as many because it's an outline, but it still has a stitch point. And I just want to lengthen those, the min and max on that outline. But instead of going into params like we did before with the inner one, well, here's the inner one up here. I'll just right click, drag, let go, set identical params. And now when I click that and generate, it's a satin. So we have no more scissors, so no more ties. So we're making our way down now to the V. And I'll just go ahead and generate these stitches. Okay, so we hit vector view. You know, everything looks good. The connection to the V's is right there. And then we have the V. And then we have the outline to the V, which we want the outline to the V to start and end where it connects to the E over here. So it looks like the E is connecting over there. That looks like that's where the E is starting. Let's see. Yeah, so down here in the parts window. So it's starting right here. So we pretty much know if the E is starting up here, then the column of the V must have been ending up here somewhere. I don't actually see it specifically, so let's just make sure. Let's click on the V, and you know, it's grouped. So I'm just going to go down here to the ending and see, yes, it's ending up there. If I hit edit, you can see this is its own little object, but if I zoom in, it's ending right here technically on this red corner. So we'll just go ahead and we'll just make our outline then start right there. So I'll click on the outline, edit, and I'll just zoom out so you could see it was starting here, and jumping over to here. So now we'll have it start up here. Place start point here and hit enter. And that connection stitch is going to the E. Let's go ahead and go into 3D. Let's generate this. And there you have it. And sometimes these connections look better when they're slanted rather than straight across anyway. So I like how that is. I'm just going to leave it. And we'll address landing a stitch point when we're all done. So that's done. And so far, you know, we have no jumps except for our last outline. The E outline, we'll just click and create connection since it's the last one. You can obviously see things are wrong. If I click on the E column, and here's the last object, and I hit edit, okay, and I hit end, you can see the highlighted note is here, but remember this is a column, so even though this is highlighted, it actually ends here where it's red, and so that's where we want our outline to start. On the outline and hit edit. So I'm going to click down here and do place start point here. Okay. So we've got our start point down here, and we'll hit enter. And now our connection is not even needed because this is starting exactly where this is ending. So we could just delete that. So we're fine. So then we'll generate those and go into 3D. And so now each outline letter is stitching, generate, right after its satin column, a regular column. And the only thing I would do now is I would go in and land my stitch points. I go into vector view. I'd see how long it is. I'm on the wrong one. Let me start at the beginning. Let me just hit Control 1 to zoom to that. Zoom out a little. So I could hit the params and you could see, you know, on connections, your min and max, that's the Embird default for connections. I'm just going to go into 3D now so I can see it. And that is a short connection. I could just change the params for that, make the max, say 1.2, and see if I get a stitch point. And I didn't. And I don't usually like to go smaller than that. If I go to 1, I still don't even see it. So I'll just bring it back up to its 1.7 and hit OK. So I'll just go to convert connection to manual. And you'll see when let me go ahead and hide this satin. When I generate this manual stitch, okay, let me also hide the outer outline. So when I made this manual stitch, I don't have any stitch points. That's because when you go into params, I set my params for manual stitches to min and max of what you see here. So what that means is you won't see a stitch penetration until your manual object is 3.2 millimeters in length. And I'm sure this one is shorter than that. I could, test it with the tape measure over here when I close this window. So, and you can change these and then, save them as your default. You can go back to Embird's defaults by resetting. If I reset it, these are the Embird defaults, but then of course you have to save it as a default. And then this will be your new setting. And for this one, you won't see a stitch point until your object is 5.5 millimeters in length. So, you just add these two and then you'll see a stitch point. I'm going to go back to the 1.2 and the 2.0 and save as default. So, but that's okay because I can edit this and land my own stitch point, and that's what we'll do. So I'll just hit OK and I'll go into edit, and you see, there's no stitch points. When it's a manual stitch length, that means that what you're seeing, the nodes that you're seeing, are actual stitch points, just as if you were an editor. So this is where it gets a little, confusing. You have to twist your brain around and think of these now as stitch points because it's a manual stitch. So anyways, so I want to land a stitch point, but guess what? I can't see the other object because I hit it. So let me X out and let me bring those back, at least the outline. I'll just bring the outline back. And now I'll go back into this manual stitch and hit edit. Okay, so the last one is selected. I'll just hit insert. It's way up there. I'll just slide it down so that it's in the center of here and here. And then I could go ahead and land one like about here somewhere. I do want to go into vector view though, and I kind of want to see my column because I'm pretty sure, yeah, these columns have edge underlay, and I don't really want my stitch point to go on top of the edge underlay. So I'm just going to hit the check for now, and I guess I will have to bring back this one just to see. Okay, so again, we'll go back into the manual stitch and hit edit. And with this one selected, I'll hit insert and see how close it is. I'll just move it just a little bit away, and that's fine. So I'll hit enter or check, and we'll go into 3D, and now I'll generate that, and there's the stitch point right there, right in the center. So this connection will pretty much disappear because the stitch point is landed right there. So then we'll go to the next connection here, and I'll just click it and then hit Control 1. That zooms into it. Now I'll just zoom out a little bit, and I'll right click. Whoops, Control Z, I'm not sure what I did. Right click and pan. You have to kind of wait till you see the hand. Okay, and I'll move that up. Just don't click on the screen. And so let's see, I'll click on this one, and again, I want my stitch point there. For right now, it's a connection, but I'm just going to go ahead and to save time, I'm just going to convert it to a manual, and I'll go ahead and edit it and insert. I'll move this there. Go into vector view so I could see my edge underlay. I'll click here, insert, move that just a little bit, hit enter. And if I go back into 3D again and hit generate, there's my stitch point. And I just have one more here. And so I'll go up to Control 1, and I'll zoom out, I'll pan, I'll hold my right mouse, oops, I almost touched the screen, and now this one, you know, is longer, a little bit longer, but I'll just do Convert Connection to Manual, and let me go into Vector View, and when I generate stitches, I'd have to hide this to be able to see when I go into 3D. So it also doesn't have any stitch points, but it doesn't even matter because I didn't have one landed here. So I'll just bring these back. So again, I'll just hit Edit, and with the last one selected, hit Insert. And actually, let me Control Z. Let me go into Vector View right away. Okay, I was thinking that maybe this one would actually be like over here. So I would save myself a step. I wouldn't really have to move it, but it didn't. So it landed right there. So we'll go ahead and we'll just move it. So it's kind of like halfway between here. You know, you want it between like the stitch penetrations. So that's about fine. And I can even, you know, move it down more like this if I want to make it less at the top. It doesn't matter too much. So I'll click here and insert. And that's fine where that is. So I'll go into 3D and generate, and there's the stitch point. So there it is. It's all done. There's no jumps, no ties. It'll stitch all in one continuous swoop. Let me just right click, and ungroup 1 is taken, so we'll do group 2, Control S. Let's zoom out. With it selected, I'll just hit either Control 1 or I can hit this icon up here. And there it is. And we'll do a sew sim on it. So we'll click down here for the sew sim. And let me pause it for a moment. I have these two buttons pressed, and this one, if you hover, it says pause on jump stitch between objects, and this one is pause on jump stitch inside objects. So I just have them both checked just as a safeguard to make sure that I'm checking myself to, you know, make sure that this stitch is all continuously in one run. And you can also see up at the top that you only have a scissor right here on the left, and you don't see any scissors going across this green bar. These little notches are just the connection stitches. So we'll go ahead and press play. It stitched the underlay, the edge underlay, and now it's stitching the column. Now the outline, and then it makes a connection to the next column. And then its outline, inner and outer, and then the next connection to the first object of the letter V, and then the second object overlaps here down at the bottom, you can see. And then it makes a connection down to the middle part of the E. And then it starts its outline there in the corner, and then finishes. Just so you know, in the if I went into params, because right now these are all the Embird defaults. So if I have this selected, I have it all grouped, so there's a bunch of different types of objects in here. That's fine. I'll just click params. Here's all my object types. So if I want to work on the params of the columns, I click here. If I want to work on the outline params, I click here, and it's grayed out because I have different settings for all my outlines, because if you recall, I turned some things into outlines. There's my manual parameters, and then here's my connection params. But as far as the column, since I have just a thin line, for my outline, you may want to set your pull com to 0.2. It's always a good idea, because of the push and pull of the satin, it might pull this in and you might have a gap here because this outline is just a thin single stitch basically. Yes, it's a double stitch, but still. So you'll want your pull com to be 0.2, and I always loosen my density just a little bit to 4.2 or 4.3. It still looks good. And I have this on auto. I just let Embird do it, and Embird decided for this width of a satin that it only needed an edge underlay. So, but you can always uncheck that and then give it a zigzag and an edge if you want. That's totally up to you, but that's another lesson. And I don't have auto corners checked. If I checked it, and let's just hit apply, you don't see a whole lot of change. A lot of times it actually looks better with it unchecked. And auto shortening is checked. That just helps you with your density. When you go around, places like this, if it's too dense, it'll shorten some of the stitches. Now, I'm not sure if it did here. I'd have to go into vector view, but the settings are just, you could make a whole 5 lessons just on the params. So, but I did want to show you about the pull comp and the density for the columns. And then even for the outline stitches, these ones going around, I usually change these to 2.0 as they go around here. Now if I've got curves, I might go 1.5 and 2.0, and I forgot to do that. So right now I can't really change them, but I can go in and when I get out of this window and select just these outlines and make them 1.5 and 2.0 instead of min at 0.7 or whatever. So, but at any rate, so that's that. I don't know if I clicked apply. So I will go in, right click on group, and I'll just manually select my outline stitches. Whoops, let's see. This was a connection. So I'll just select the ones that I know are traditional outlines that we see here, not the ones that I converted from a connection to an outline. So with them selected now, I'll go back into params and see now I can change them. So I'll just make it like 1.5, and 2.0 is fine. So it didn't change much. You could see the O did change a little because the O is got curves in it, so it did change it up. The ones that are straight line, they pretty much stuck with just the 2.0. This goes into effect when you have curves. So that's that. And let me save that. And that's it. Group 2, Control S again. And then you would just compile and bring it into editor. So there you go. So I hope this was helpful. I know it was a long video, and honestly, I've just touched the surface on what you can do with outlining text and other things that you can do with text. And remember, if you have questions, you can always sign up for a lesson at WeQuiltStudio.com. You can write me on Facebook. My name is Lisa WeQuilt. And you can also join my membership, where you get 4 free videos every month for only $10 a month. And that's at buymeacoffee.com/WeQuilt, I believe. But I'll have links down in the description for that. So, all right then. Well, we'll see you next time. Have a good one. Bye.